Good morning, everyone. Welcome back, and we're excited to bring day 2 of the SouthON Sears meeting to you. I'm Terry Bunn, Professor of Preventive Medicine and Environmental Health and Director of the Kentucky Injury Prevention and Research Center at the University of Kentucky, as well as the Principal Investigator of the Kentucky Occupational Safety and Health Surveillance Program and the recent SouthON Conference Program. We had an exciting day yesterday that started with Dr. Howard talking about the future of work and strategic foresight. He talked about anticipating policies, strategies, and innovations for occupational safety and health that focused on work, workplace, and workforce, including the hybrid workforce, which is very much in existence right now, that includes working remotely as well as on-site. We also had an intriguing industry panel on challenges associated with employee safety during COVID, particularly those in the fishing industry and restaurant and retail industries. The panel presentation was then followed up by the pilot project presentations where funded researchers highlighted their project results in multiple occupational safety and health related areas. SouthON partners with Sears on these important issues that face workers on a daily basis. For those who are not familiar with SouthON, our first meeting was held in 2011, so this is our 11th annual SouthON meeting. SouthON's comprised of occupational health departments within the 12-state southeastern region who are either funded or unfunded by NIOSH for state-based occupational safety and health surveillance programs. Southeast region includes Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. So a lot of great states in the Southeastern region. Our other integral partners in SouthON are the Southeastern Regional ERCs and the Ag Centers, as well as industry and worker organizations and coalitions. Our purpose of SouthON is to build relationships with state-based occupational epidemiologists, with NIOSH, our academic colleagues, OSHA, industries, and other worker and work-related agency partners. SouthON provides epidemiology and program planning, tools to help build capacity. We develop common priorities for occupational injury and illness surveillance, epidemiology methods, worksite interventions, and research, as well as promoting those scientific collaborations among member states and agency partners. SouthON's pleased today to welcome our keynote speaker to the conference, Mr. Steve Tucker, who is the Director of Global Health and Safety at Beam Suntory, the third largest premium spirits company in the world. Since 2016, Steve has been leading health and safety strategies at Beam Suntory's global operations that includes 19 distilleries and bottling plants, as well as the company's supply chain, sales offices, and remote workers. Their headquarters is currently in Chicago, but I recently read that they'll be moving their headquarters to New York City in 2022, along with their Japanese parent company, Suntory Holdings. Beam Suntory started a partnership with the University of Kentucky a couple of years ago called the Beam Institute, where students can study distillation, wine, and brewing, which is a very unique offering in U.S. universities. And they also offer workforce development opportunities. I Googled Steve in case he's wondering where I obtained the extra info, and he serves on the Distilled Spirits Council Fire Protection Committee, a position especially needed in an industry where flammable alcohol is involved, and he'll be speaking more about that exact need in his presentation. Before Beam Suntory, Steve worked as the Western Region Senior Environmental Health and Safety Manager at Kellogg's, where he was responsible for environmental health and safety at 9 manufacturing operations in North America. He also worked at West Rock as Director of Quality and Environmental Health and Safety for their pizza box division at their 12 manufacturing locations across North America. He holds a BS degree in environmental management and an MS degree in organization development and leadership from St. Joseph's University. He's been married to 20 years to his wife, Annalisa, and proud father of 5 children, which I'm guessing during this pandemic has been quite interesting. They reside in Louisville, where Steve enjoys golfing, water sports, water sports, reading, and cycling. So welcome, Steve, and we look forward to hearing more about global health and safety at Beam Suntory.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bunn, for that introduction, probably more than I deserve. And I think you've said it all. I don't need to say much more here today. So I appreciate that. I thought we would kind of walk through a number of things today. First, I'd just give you a brief introduction to our business and the markets that we serve. Then I wanted to get into a little about me. I thought, I understand there's quite a few students on the call, and maybe talk through a little bit about how I got where I am today and some of the challenges I face in my role. And then, as Dr. Bunn said, we'll talk a little bit about fire safety and some of the major challenges we face as we work with and around the risk for fire and those sorts of things. So let's see if this works perfectly. Okay, here's a little bit about Beam. Beam Suntory is a smaller part of our larger company, Suntory. We have about 4,800 employees. That grows every year. Our total sales for our division is $4.6 billion. We're the #1 bourbon in the world and #1 Japanese whiskey, and we sell about 60 million cases a year. To give you a little view of who we are in a bigger picture, Suntory is a $21 billion company. And this is where we sit over here on the left, which is the mixed spirit sale. But I'll give you a little bit idea of region and where we fit in the larger picture of Suntory. As we move into types of whiskeys that we sell, I thought I might tempt your appetite a little bit and just give you a little flavor of some of our products. Obviously, Jim Beam and Maker's Mark are two of our largest, but as you get into Japan, you'll start seeing Suntory whiskey, which is very common. There's actually a movie made about Suntory whiskey that starred Bill Murray, so you may want to check that out. Some other products that we have, these are not all, but not everybody knows that we have a ready-to-drink category, which are not hard liquors. They're just soft drinks and other types of things like that. So to just build on what Dr. Bunn said, I wanted to kind of introduce myself and show you a little bit about me. My family, a father of 5 children. There's a good picture of them. My oldest is 19. My youngest is 7. So they keep us busy, and being and working from home in a sheltered house like we have, it's been interesting. And my wife is practically a saint for being a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a psychologist, and all these things. And she happens to be sitting right over there. So I'm going to say as many nice things as I can about her. But that's been really the driver for me in my career is my family. I played professional golf for 3 years, and you may see how that plays a part in my career as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But one little known thing about me that might be of interest to you is I do think I inspired the look for Dumb and Dumber. I think that speaks for itself there. All right, there we go. So I thought it might be valuable to walk you through my career and kind of tell you how I got where I am and maybe talk through how things adapted for me, how I needed to change and adapt over my career. So my first degree is in communications. I really wanted to be a broadcaster. In fact, I worked for the Kansas City Royals for a few years, and I had about 6 credit hours left in that degree when I realized I didn't want to do that. As you can imagine, I was fairly young, 21, 22 years old. And it's a humbling experience to know that you put in this time, this effort, all this work, and then realize right as you get up to the end of that that's not what you want to do. So I struggled mightily with where those next steps might be. And as I struggled, I turned to a couple things. One was golf. As I started to play golf, it helped me to realize what I was good at, how I could market myself, how I could motivate myself, how I could be a self-worker and dedicate myself to a trade. And that was unfortunately not very successful, but I had fun and I learned a lot through that process. Along the way, I was introduced to a couple of really good friends who helped me work in the fire suppression industry. I worked for a company called Engineered Fire Protection and then later Fire One Incorporated. And these companies were small businesses, but they provided me with opportunities to lead for the first time in my life in a professional setting. Later, I obviously wanted to go back and find something I was passionate for. I knew I didn't want to work as a project manager or anything like that. So I started to look for opportunities, and I wanted to go to graduate school. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. So you can see how kind of all over the board I was at this point in my life. I didn't know what I wanted. My wife was able to take a job, and I had planned to go to get my master's degree. And right at that time, I was offered a position as a production supervisor. And this is my first introduction to manufacturing. And in all fairness, I didn't view manufacturing as where my career would take me. But here we were. I worked as a supervisor for a night shift. If you've never worked night shift, that's always exciting and interesting. But it provides you with opportunities you don't necessarily get on the day shift because you don't have the support staff that you do on a normal shift. So I had to be the master of all things and led a shift of about 150 people. And after about a year, my boss came to me and he said, "Steve, you've done a great job. We're really pleased with your work, and we'd like to offer you a promotion." And I was so excited. I was just through the moon. My first reaction was, all right, I get to go to day shift. And I thought it would be some kind of like a production role. And they said, "We want you to be our environmental health and safety manager." Now, I was crushed. I thought, no. And I turned it down and immediately came home and was I went from the highs and lows over the course of 20 minutes. And a few days later, that same person who was the vice president of this organization at Rex and Containers, he said, "Steve, I want to talk to you." So we sat down. He said, "Steve, I don't know what your hang up is, but we think you'd be really good at this. And we want you to do this. There's not likely to be any other opportunities for you to be promoted. We think you're ready for this. And if you don't take this, you're probably going to be stuck in this role until something else comes up." And I said, "I just am not interested in this. It's not the right thing for me, blah, blah, blah." Well, he said, "Can I just ask you," right as we're about to leave, he pulls me back. He says, "Can I just ask you what your hang up is?" I said, "Steve, I feel like you're firing me." He said, "What?" He about fell over. And I explained to him in my year and a half that I was with this company, they had gone through 5 EHS managers, 5. All 5 of them had been terminated. So from my perspective, this role is one that you go into and you are released quickly thereafter. Little did I know that would be my passion. And one of the things I asked him is, I'd be willing to do this if you let me do it my way, if I can be creative. I don't want to be the guy that stands up once a month and sits the whole company down and does an hour-long training. That's not who I am. So he agreed to that, and it helped to create really this opportunity for my passion to grow and develop. It's a passion I didn't even know I had. It was a passion I was incredibly unqualified for at the time. So that role led to every other role that I had, and it created a foundation for me to be successful. As Dr. Bunn walked through, you can see some of the other roles I've had and how I've been able to develop over the years as a result of that decision to trust somebody and trying to do things a little bit differently than what had been done in the past. One of the things I thought I'd give you visibility to is our safety vision. This is a massive amount of work that's summed up in one simple slide, but it will highlight maybe some of the things that are most important to me and our company at Beam Suntory. First and foremost is our commitment to our people and driving the individual ownership for safety. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward, but these are the things that are most important to our business and most important to me as the leader in our business of this area. I wanted to also give you a little scope as to where we've come from, to give you some context as to how we've developed as a company. If I were to go back farther, I'll pull your attention to the top left of the screen. If I was to go back farther into 2010, our TRI, our total recordable incident rate, was 6.4. So quite a bit higher, and we've had a really solid trajectory and a downward trend there. What I'm most happy about is to tell you that not only has our rate improved, with the exception of this last year, which was still our second best year we've ever had on record, but our severity has severely declined. We've seen a 62% decrease in injury severity. So 55% of our injuries right now are sprains and strains, which while I don't want any injuries, I'll take those. I will live with people having minor injuries where they're back at work the next day or even the same day. They don't have any long-term ill effects. They're healthy, they're happy. We can deal with those types of injuries. So really good success story for us, and I'm really proud of our results. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges I face in my role. Again, just to give you some visibility and maybe help in some of your career development as you grow in your own career, hopefully towards EHS. But I think some of these things translate into a lot of different types of employment. So first, the biggest growth area for me in taking this new role was trying to think globally. That probably sounds simple, but you really can't even explain it until you experience it. What I've learned is that what works in one part of the world will rarely work in another, or there are many opportunities where you have to tweak that even just a little bit so that it does work. You have to view yourself as a bridge builder, someone that's connecting two different parts of the world and trying to align them towards a goal that's meaningful and inspired on both ends. One thing that really stood out to me when I first started this role, our CEO, we were talking about safety absolutes. These are things that the must-dos, right? If you do this, we never want to mess these things up. And one of the things that resonated with him was simply holding a handrail. Now, all of us experience this many times a day, whether that's going downstairs in your home or in your office or whatever. You're going to go down some stairs or upstairs, of course. And we always encourage 3 points of contact. And our CEO was very passionate about, let's just have one safety absolute that is outside of supply chain that we can all hold each other accountable to. And he wanted that to be holding on to safety handrails. So I was all for it. I thought, great, this is wonderful. So I sent out this beautifully written document. We sent it out to all of our sites. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, I got daily emails from our team in India. And they said, Steve, this is probably something we can't do. And the more, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And it made no sense to me. It seemed so simple to me that this thing would be the one thing that hung them up. So about 1.5 years later, I visited India for the first time. And I had this memory in my head of what can I do to help drive this and improve this. And as I visited one of our plants in India, they had a large pizza party for me. And they wanted me to kind of talk to the team. And as I was standing outside in an alley before to enter the building, I saw the pizza guy pull up. He's on a motorcycle with 10 pizzas stacked on the back of his motorcycle. Now he picks these pizzas up, puts them on his head, all 10 of them, in flip-flops, and runs up the stairs. And when I say run, I mean skipping steps, no step-by-step, no handrails, while balancing 10 pizza boxes on his head. Now, my first reaction was, wow, that's really impressive. My second reaction was, I understand why it's so difficult. The culture is so different in India than it is in the United States. I couldn't have understood that without seeing it. Then, as I continued my tour around many plants in India that week, I realized half of our facilities don't even have handrails. And here I was telling our company globally to make sure you use handrails. Right? I didn't have a global view of the world. I didn't have a global view of my position, but I tried my best and I've learned and I've realized that's one of the most difficult things that I do in my role is try to understand the challenges that one part of the world faces that I may not have an understanding of here in Louisville, Kentucky. The next most challenging thing I think is really the strategic thinking versus tactical thinking. In some ways, it's very unfair because you're taught your whole career up to the point where you get a senior leadership role that you react to the thing that's most urgent, right? Something happens and we react to it. Where you get into a role like this, all of a sudden you're shifted and you have to be a visionary. You almost have to be a Swami where you can try and predict where things were going. And I'll draw your attention back to the previous slide 2 slides ago that had our safety vision. These are things that we are going to hold dear to our heart, that are going to be the motivators for us to work and to provide for our future success. So being able to be a strategic thinker is really critical in my role and in any role that you're in a senior position. Next is cultural development. Again, this is something I'm extremely passionate about. Is how do we inspire people? Now, I am a caring person. It's part of my MO to be empathetic, to reach out, to use my vulnerabilities to try and inspire other people. That works in the U.S. that I will tell you firsthand that does not work in Scotland. Scotland is a rough and tough area. When you go there and you try and give them a hug or a pat on the back, they want to slap you in the face, right? It's a little bit different, and you have to be aware of those cultural differences. When you start to look at things like diversity and inclusion, you see even more cultural significance, where we have to constantly be aware of our role in promoting and educating about cultural awareness. And when it comes to safety, the things that motivate someone here in Kentucky are going to be different than what motivates them in other parts of the world. And in my role, I have to be really aware of how I can pull on heartstrings in one part of the world, and in other areas, I have to be funny. I have to be very tactical. I have to be driven by different motivators than in some other part of the world. What's become even more and more important over this last year is remote leadership. I think most of us have tried to learn on the fly in this category. It's been so easy for me to just hop on a plane, even if it's many, many hours away, and go visit and be present and be part of that facility's life, if you will. But in this last year, it's made it extremely difficult with COVID to not be there in person. And so that creates environments where we have to be able to lead from afar. And to stay engaged. So how do we do that? For me, it's been in a very odd way. I have more face time than I've ever had with any of our team members. When I look back in March, April of last year, when we turned on these video cameras for the first time, it felt kind of awkward. It felt a little bit unusual. You guys were probably questioning whether I had pajama pants on top of this suit and tie. All those kinds of questions that we were asking each other back then are now very normalized. And so in an odd way, I've had so much more face time with our team members across the world than I ever did before, because I'd only see them 1 or 2 weeks a year versus now I can see them literally every week. So that remote leadership has been a really big growth factor for us in my role. The next piece I want to talk about is standardization. We have 2 facilities in Kentucky that are 10 miles apart. They're actually under the exact same leadership team. The same leadership supports each site. One of them is a large kind of visitor campus. That's our main Jim Beam campus. And the other one is where the work gets done. There's no visitors. It's a huge facility, but it's only about 12 miles apart. When I first visited these 2 sites, I went to the Claremont campus first. Again, that's our visitor campus. It's the prettied up version of everything you see. It's really designed to give the visitor a wonderful experience. So I went to our distillery and I noticed something and I said, that's a great idea. I love this. A few days later, I went down to Booker Noe and I looked at the same type of distillery. There's very little different about this in terms of process, but they were using an entirely different system than what the other plant was. 10 to 12 miles away, same leadership, and yet totally different execution of the same process. So I asked the question, why are we doing it one way over there and a different way over here? And it really solidified in my head that good practices exist all over the world, but they're only good practices if you share them and if you apply them at all of your sites. So that was a good example of standardizing as much as we can. Let's take the good practices that we have in one part of the world and make sure we do them at all of our facilities. My next area of focus to talk about is relentlessly focusing on high risk. It's easy to get bogged down in the sprains and strains, right? These are things I don't want to ever happen to any of our people, but I will take them. A lot of people are surprised to hear that because you live in a culture where we hear things like zero is the ultimate target. I think that's just a little bit misaligned. I want that. I want that so much, but we are human. We are trying to drive people towards perfect behaviors, which will never happen. But if I focus relentlessly on eliminating those things that can seriously injure our people, things that can change their lives, things that can end their lives, if I focus relentlessly on that and we align our team around that, then we can live with those minor injuries that happen. And then we can have a high level of comfort going to bed at night that we've done all we can to eliminate risk in our business. The next part that's been a big challenge, big learning curve is enterprise-wide safety. So what do I mean by that? My whole career up to this point has been supply chain focused, right? Where we do the work, the things that we make and we put out the door and we sell them. since then, I've had to think about things like our sales teams, offices, remote workers, our marketing team, our brand ambassadors, and our supply chain. And I'm missing a few as well. So trying to be able to be really consciously aware, engage people in safety. It's easy for supply chain people to understand that safety is an important part of their job. It's not so easy to get someone working in an office in downtown Chicago to think that they also have similar risk in their business. So trying to engage people in that has been a challenge, but a fun challenge nonetheless. And then lastly is time management and prioritization. So kind of to go back with some of the few things I've talked about, it's so easy to get in the weeds and to get lost in those weeds. And as you create things like a vision, a strategy, you can always come back to the things that are most important. And you have to be really aware of focusing solely on the things that are most important and not being distracted by the weeds that are out there and ready to take your day away. In my experience with the people that I support on our team, that is their number one challenge that they face, is being distracted by things that really don't matter as much as the big picture items. So be aware of that and try to focus on those things that we can do to drive that out. So I want to introduce you to our central team, our EHS team, I should say. We only have 43 EHS professionals globally. That's a very small team. 4,800 employees, 43 EHS workers. So that's about one for every 112 employees. And if you look at best practice, when I worked at Kellogg's, we had one for every 50. So almost twice, a little more than half what we had there. So how do we drive and improve safety with a small team? And that's what I want to talk about here in the next few slides is ways that we've empowered our team. I'll point your attention to that picture right there on the right. We were awarded our Vision into Action Award at Beam in 2019. For 2020. This is the company's highest honor. It's the biggest award that they give, and our team won it. And I was so thrilled with that, especially because we have a tight-knit team. We have a very small team. Our team is very limited in turnover. We've lost one person over the last 5 years since I've been here, and that was for a promotion at another company. So although we have a tight team, it's really important to talk about how we're able to be effective with such a small team. So the first thing that comes to mind is engagement, and I am all about engagement. I love engaging our people. When you have a small team, the only way you can be successful is to engage people. So you have to turn your team of 43 EHS professionals into a team of 4,800 engaged employees, right? And that's how we look at things. So I'll give you a few examples of that. These four groups of people, these are my heroes, and I don't use that lightly. These are individual employee-led safety teams. We call this employee engaged safety. They've created their own logos, their own team names. You see what they stand for there, how they identify themselves. And these are 4 of the eventual 19 teams that we will have in place. Each of these teams is anywhere from 10 to 15 people. And they are hourly employees. In every case, except for at Maker's Mark, they are union employees. These are people we have partnered with. We have identified as leaders in our business who have potential, but they work their normal jobs. These are people who are operators. They are fork truck drivers. They work in our warehouses. And what we do is we train them so much. We show them how much we care about them. And they literally become EHS professionals. They don't know this, but they are. And I assure you they are. They work every day at leading safety in our plants. And these are remarkable people who have taken on a challenge. And kudos to our EHS team because we've developed them into these roles. It's a very formalized process. It's, of course, over about 1.5 years that we developed these people. And these are our 3 plants in Kentucky. And then the bottom right is our site in Scotland, which was our first international team. To give you an idea of the type of commitment that we give to these people, I made 17 trips in 2019 to visit Scotland and support this team and educate them and train them. And that's the type of commitment it takes in order to build these people. But now, if you were to go to any of these sites, you would not be impressed by the EHS manager. You would be impressed by these people who lead EHS in those facilities. Those teams collaborate and they share. They work together. These are pictures of all of them mixed together. We take groups every month, and small parts of each of those teams go to the other sites, and they collaborate. They work together. We celebrate as a team. I think this is really important. We try to have fun. One of the things that's easiest to do, I think, is to just reward and recognize people. So here's just some pictures of some of our celebrations. I love the picture in the middle of Walter White, just reminding people to be safe as they come into work. But celebration is a big part of what we do. We do this all the time. You'll see our hand safety initiative. That's our folks over in Ireland right there in the middle. And then we do things like a safety starts with meme competition. Simple things. We use our local internet page on our company website that tries to engage people. And we have, small prizes, but it's just ways that people can be engaged. And again, these are from our hourly employees. These are things that they create, and then we try to motivate them and get them engaged. Another way we try to have fun is just to make things real. I can talk to you about something all day. I can plead to you to work safely and to be careful in your day-to-day life. But my words don't matter that much to you, nor should they. What matters is when I can show you, I can give you an experience, and then you can make your own decision as to why it's so important. So one of the things we've done is mock injure people. We pretend that they're hurt. We give them crutches. We put them in casts, and then we make them do simple tasks like eat a meal with their left hand instead of their right hand, or walk on crutches and try to go upstairs, right? Simple things that put it in their head how hard it is when you have an injury and some of the things that are affected. One of the most fun things that we've ever done that you will have a blast with, you'll see the lady there with the wiffle ball bat. She has on impairment goggles. Now, these impairment goggles, they kind of mock you being drunk. And it is a riot to watch people do the most simple of tasks, like hit a baseball, with impairment goggles on. We've done things like try to stack cups with those same goggles. And it's just a fun way that people can experience for themselves how important it is to take care of themselves and others. Okay, so that's really about how our company has been successful, about our vision, and really a little bit about how important it's been for us to show our vulnerable side and care for our employees. What I want to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so, a lot is about some of our risk. And our biggest risk is our maturation warehouses, our barrel warehouses. Now, to give you a little context, when I started at Beam, I wanted to see, I'd never been in a warehouse, so I was naturally curious to see a warehouse. So I'll show you a little bit about them. So these are beautiful buildings. They're iconic. People see them and they immediately sort of feel like they're at home. They're almost a welcoming mat for those that visit our campuses, and they're aesthetically pleasing. But they're also quite dangerous. This is a picture of a competitor. This is not one of our warehouses. But when I started at Beam, I was curious, as I said, and I wanted to see a warehouse. And they took me to our warehouse manager took me to see a warehouse. And as I walked through it, I said I was kind of appalled. I was scared to death by what I was looking at. I was very, very alarmed by what I was seeing. And I said to this guy, I said, Dave, can you take me to one of our better warehouses? He says back to me, he goes, Steve, this is the Cadillac of warehouses. And I didn't know it at the time, but this was a brand new warehouse. It had only been open for about a year. It was our newest warehouse. But I had been seeing our best warehouse, and in my eyes, it was extremely dangerous. So we went through a process over the course of 3 years where we really had to renovate our warehouses. We made the news. How about that? Some of you may remember this event that happened in 2019 at our warehouse out in Frankfort, Kentucky. Now, we didn't do anything wrong in this. This was a lightning strike, and yes, we did have lightning protection on that. We actually have video of the actual lightning strike, and it is impressive how quickly that building was up in flames. But it created a massive challenge for us in how we manage the flow of liquid out of our building, how we can somehow suppress fire. Fire is a fear of mine every day. I worry about the effects of fire. What you're looking at on the right there, that picture, that building is about 55 feet high. And so if you project those flames, more than double, almost triple probably what the size of that building is. And it creates a huge challenge. Now, we were, of course, aware of these challenges, and thankfully we had done enough to prevent fire from spreading to our other buildings. So some of our processes actually helped us in this case, where it prevented other buildings from catching on fire. Now, you might be familiar with in 1994, I believe it was, a competitor had about 12 different warehouses catch on fire. That you starts in one building and it leaps to the next. So there's been some good processes in place, but we really taken it to another level. I'll let that flames there excite you for a few minutes. But you can see the danger that exists with these warehouses. Sorry, I'm having a quick challenge. There we go. So what do we do to prevent fires and to delay any part of it has caused us to shift our way of thinking, right? Our natural way of thinking is we should do everything we can to put out a fire, and we should always do that. But we know from experiences that when our warehouses catch fire, we are not trying to put that fire out. It is impossible, darn near impossible, unless it is caught extremely soon. So our focus has shifted to life safety. How do we protect our people so that they have enough time to get out of that building in the event that there's a fire? So we have professional firefighters at our sites. These are our employees. And as I mentioned earlier, they are people who have other jobs. They're not just professional firefighters. They work in our facilities, but they have the opportunity to serve on a fire brigade, and they're professionally trained and certified, and they receive a tremendous amount of training, but they are at our sites. So if we have an event, they can respond to it. They also respond to our communities. Most of our facilities in the United States are in remote areas. And so if there is a event that occurs, 2 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road, they can help support that oftentimes quicker than the local fire departments can do. So really proud of these people. They do a tremendous amount of work. To give you an idea of how things burn in fire, if you look at the bottom left picture, that is that fire that I just showed you a video and pictures of on the previous slides. What you're looking at there are barrel rungs. These are our barrel chimes. These are the pieces of metal that wrap around each of the barrels. And that is them stacked up one after another after everything else was burned out of that building. So that's how many barrels there were. Lots of barrel rungs there that you can obviously see the impact that happens when we have a fire. So to give you an idea of our numbers, we have, in Kentucky alone, we have 4 sites that have barrel warehousing. There's 10 different complexes around those 4 sites. We have 129 warehouses and over 4 million barrels in storage. Over the last 5 years, we've allocated $25 million to repairing these buildings. So far, in the 3 years since we were approved those 5 years of $25 million, we've spent $15 million of actual dollars. We've replaced over 300 miles of walkboard, if you put it end to end. And we've recently gotten approval for $10 million more to spend on approval. Now, that $10 million more is simply for things that we don't know about today. We found that a lot. That none of these warehouses are the same. It may require that we brace one of the warehouses to keep it from falling over, or it may require that we jack it up to improve the foundation. And those things cost money that aren't necessarily budgeted for until you get in there and do the work. So a total over 5 years, an investment of $35 million. To tell you a little bit about Jim Beam, none of this was budgeted when I got here. None of it. All of this was extra. It was add-on. And after we built the business case, not one person has questioned that spend. We were almost happy to do it. And in the next few slides, I'm going to show you a little bit about our successes. I will tell you we have changed the industry, not just in Kentucky, but globally. We have put pressure on the Scotch Whisky Association in France and Spain. All of these locations are now looking at what we've done and saying we need to do the same thing. So of everything I've ever helped do in my career, I am quite confident this will be the most significant piece of work we've ever done in terms of changing an industry and a culture as well. So let me give you a little idea of what types of warehouses we have. So we have wood ricks. These are the most traditional. They're the pretty ones that everybody likes to visit. We have metal ricks. So it's basically a wooden rick, but made out of metal. And then we have palletized warehouses. These are the safest that we can have. We put 6 to 9 barrels on a pallet, we band them together so they can't fall, and then we stack them on top of each other. There are also different types of warehouses inside these types of buildings. So we have a hoist. That's where we're able to lift the barrels in basically like an escalator type of position. An elevator type of position. We have an escalator warehouse, which may not sound like it is, but in the middle picture there, it's a middle device that raises and lowers so that it can then push the barrels into the racks. We have fixed escalators, similar to the hoist. And then there's smaller warehouses like a 6-high, and then, of course, the palletized. So I want to take you through a few of our challenges, and these are significant challenges. To give you some history, I want to go back to that warehouse as I asked that employee, hey, can you show me one of our good warehouses? Well, after that, we walked through a lot of our bad warehouses, and these are the types of things that we would see. They may not look that bad to your eye, but what you see there in the picture on the right, all those little dots, all that little dust, it looks like dust, is essentially, it's from a powder post beetle. These are little beetles that dig into the wood, and they burrow in there for up to 13 years before they come out. And you don't see any of the damage until they come out. So all those little spots, all that dust and debris that you see in the wood, that is when the beetle comes out of that wood after it's hatched. And as you can see there, a cross section in the middle and to the left, that's what that wood looks like after they come out of that wood. Now, you talk about degradation, you talk about putting things into a situation where it's not safe. Imagine walking on a walkboard that looks like that. Here's an example of what happens when things look like that. The top left picture, that's after I kicked the board. I kicked it and it just shattered. It just came out like it was dust. Nothing to stop you from damaging that wood, but it looks fine from the outside. As you look on the bottom left, you'll see a walkboard that broke. Someone walked on that and they fell. And in all transparency, we had people falling just by doing their job. They were walking, a board was breaking, and they were falling. In one case, we had an employee fall 7 stories, and luckily each walkboard that broke kind of broke his fall just a little bit from one story to the next to the next. That employee didn't even get hurt. Unbelievable. But we accepted this as the norm before I got here, and we decided very quickly this is not how we're going to do business. So some of the things that we did, I told you we replaced over 300 miles of walkboard. One of the things we did is pull the picture on your left. We took that one out, and you can see the gap that exists from the side of the walkboard to the other, the dunnage where the barrels sit. And there's about a 12-inch gap on each side. Now, I wouldn't fit through a 12-inch gap, but some people will. And if you fall, even if you misstep, it's like walking on a balance beam instead of a sturdy surface. So that picture on the right is the same picture. We widen those walkboards almost 9 inches, and it provides a much more sturdy surface. Not only are they safe and secure, you're not at risk of falling through them anymore, but we've given you a wider space to walk on. As you look at our walkways where people walk down our aisles, number one, you'll see barrels stored in those aisles on the left. Totally unacceptable. That's a fire route. As you know, as I've just explained, fire is a big challenge for us. We can't have obstacles of people trying to exit a building when there's a fire, if there's a fire. So first thing we did is get rid of barrels being stored in aisles. Second thing you'll see is the gaps in between the walkboards. Again, imagine a walkboard breaking, and the less gap you have, the better possibility you have of catching yourself. So now we've eliminated the risk of falling through. We've closed those gaps, and you can see the drastic difference between the before and after there. Accessibility in our warehouses was a big challenge, just being able to get from one floor to the next. Now, the picture on the left, that's one of our better walkways up to the next level. We were asking people to crawl through things, to step over things, to go through spider webs, and it was dangerous and it was a challenge. And once again, we had stairs breaking as people were going up and down them. So you can see the before and after, again, of brand new warehouses. Now, one thing that I'll point out, this required elimination of storage. So In the areas in the after photos, some of those used to be places we stored barrels, which the way you should see that is that's how we kept our money, right? So we took money out of the business, we reduced our capacity in order to better protect our people. And that speaks volumes about the culture we're trying to create at Beam. Some of our mechanisms that we use to lift and lower barrels were also a challenge. So we didn't have fall protection at open elevator shafts, for example. So you can see the improvements we made with putting in fall protection to ensure people don't fall down an elevator shaft. We also had pieces of equipment, these elevators themselves, as they were lowering barrels. People were working down below, and then as we raise the barrels up to the floor that we need them, they take them off, and then they lower them back down. And the people down below often didn't know that barrels were coming or that the elevator was coming. So we had to give identification so that we didn't hit anybody while they were down there. And so we put noise on it. So now there's an alarm. We put on some chains that give a visual and audible clue that it's being lowered. And in our infinite wisdom, something that should have been done many, many decades ago, we put the controls at the lower level so that the operator who is in danger is the one that controls the hoist in the first place. These are examples of our walkways inside the ricks. We call these ricks, and they go in between those two walk spaces, and they'll walk front and back, moving barrels in and out of those racks. And they could easily fall as they come to the end of that. So as you can see there, we put in some just simple fall protection that prevented people from falling out unexpectedly. Lighting, huge problem. When we first went through this exercise of trying to get all this money for improving our warehouses, we had to build a business case. Now imagine being a company hundreds of years old where none of this had ever been brought up. No one ever identified this as a hazard. Now here's this new guy who comes in and says, I need many, many millions of dollars to fix our warehouses. I was literally questioned about my ability to do the job. I was almost fired 90 days in because I alerted people to some of these risks. Finally, after that, I said, guys, please come with me. I invited our entire executive leadership team to come on a tour of our warehouses. Now, there's no question in my mind that some of them had never been inside a real warehouse. They had been inside the tour route warehouses, but never a real one. And one of them got in there and said, are you going to turn the lights on? And I said, they are on. And they said, well, do they go back there where it's so dark? I said, yeah, that's where they work. So lighting was a massive problem. Imagine working in the dark on those 6-inch walkboards, elevated, 20 feet in the air. Scary proposition. So dramatic improvements. We put LED lighting in all of our warehouses. That may sound simple, but all of our warehouses are massive fire risks, so they have to be a special type of rating that allows us to put any kind of lighting in. So imagine every bit of lighting, you basically have to triple the price of that lighting. This is our last serious injury. This is the one injury that happened to us about 3 weeks after I started my job. And these are barrels that come in and they're stacked, in this case, 3 high. Now, in order to get barrels out of a trailer like this, people had to walk on top of the first layer in order to get the third layer. So our employees literally would jump on top of that lower level of the barrels and walk on top of the barrel lids. Then they would make their way front to back. Well, one of our employees got their legs stuck in between the openings of those barrels. And it actually caused what they call a compartment syndrome, which can be a very threatening disease. It led to sepsis and an infection, and this person was out for almost a year and had some significant injury. So we made the decision right then that we would no longer walk on top of barrels. So that is a pretty big, significant challenge for us in terms of how do we correct this problem. So in order to do that, firstly, you're getting rid of an entire layer of barrels. That's 33% of our business that we have to increase in order to logistically make ends meet. So right away, we initially started out with, we're gonna spend more money to do this safely. Then it required our people to basically take them down in this manner. An employee would look at that second layer, they would drop it on the floor, and these are empty barrels, by the way, so they weigh about 125 pounds, and they would drop them onto the floor and roll them out. That was our first solution. Now we have it completely automated. We've got trucks, so now we can put them 3 high again, which increases our profit, and it allows us to take the people out of the system altogether. Now, simple solution, but they did not have an adapter like this. We had to create this. We partnered with a couple of fantastic companies, and now this is an industry standard across the board. Another challenge we had is how do we load and unload our barrels into our buildings? So these are our escalators, and now before we had to put these in and use machines manually to lift these into place. Now we've got these beautiful escalators that you basically just roll them on them. A cradle will come through and lift them right up to the floor. They'll roll right out. No one has to touch them. And most importantly, people don't have to stand next to an open elevator shaft and risk falling down it while they're moving equipment. So huge investment, but the payoff is incredibly great for us. Fall protection has been a huge risk for us. I will never forget the day I saw a person jump from one aisle to the other, about 25 feet in the air. They jumped from one side all the way to the other and did it safely. It was rather impressive, but they were working at height without being protected. And in many cases, this is grandfathered in. So technically, we weren't doing anything wrong because these are old buildings and they have a lot of allowable rules that was just the way we did business. And the first reaction we got was, Steve, we can't put fall protection in. The first fight I got was, we're working in a narrow space. I can't wear a harness. The harness will catch on something and I'll end up hurting myself, or I won't be able to fit into a tight space because I've got that harness on. Well, we tried out 100 different harnesses and we found a couple that worked. Next was, there's no way to tie off, which was actually a good pushback, because you can't tie off on a piece of wood that is damaged by powder post beetles, right? That piece of wood is not going to hold you up. So we had to replace all that wood, and then we had to put in good anchor points for our people to be able to tie off on. So really pleased with that work as well. Some more examples of how we've used fall protection. And I should mention, this presentation will be available to you if you want to look through it in more detail. So one of the biggest wins that we had was in protecting our people, was changing the culture that exists in the people that worked in these areas. So we went through and we now have a mentor training program and a new hire training. I failed to update this. We've actually had over 100 employees go through this training. And it's an ongoing training. This is something that you now have to do. The old days was a new person would come in day one and we'd throw them right into the work and they'd learn on the fly. Now they have over 2 weeks of intensive training that allows them to understand the risks, the processes, the concerns that we have, and build relationships with their team members so they're more likely to look out for each other as they work. This is by far our most risky area that we have in our business. The last thing I want to show you is really our trailer loading. This is another good win for us. Again, it's changed the industry. It's become a standard across the board. But this is how we used to ship them, 90 barrels stacked on end, as you see in the picture on the left. As I mentioned, we decided we would no longer head up barrels, which means store them up like that. They're not as safe. During transport, they become loose, they fall over, they put pressure on the doors. When people open the doors, they push the door open and the door might hurt the employee. So we decided to put them on their end. So as you see them in the middle picture, laid down. Now again, this decreased the amount that we could ship by about a third. So that was version 1. We got rid of that altogether and put in a cradle system. So as you'll see on the picture on the right, we wanted to put in a track that allows these barrels to roll back and forth without having to be maneuvered by hand as much. So there's version 1, which is a little strap system. And then we put in a simple D-ring that allows us to hook them together. And I'll show you a picture of what that improvement looked like. So before and after is pretty significant. We're able to stack these on top of each other. We started to put them in a system that we could secure them. But we couldn't secure them enough, so we went another step further. And let me skip that one. Here we are. we put in a final strap system over the top. So now at this point, we're able to get the same number of barrels that we had at the beginning, 90 barrels. So we're not losing any investment money in the company. And as we transport these back together, they virtually cannot move. They're strapped down by tie downs, they're ratcheted down, they're secured down. They have secures on each side of the trailers. So imagine driving these many miles over highway. If you have an accident, these can go flying. Lots of potential risks in this, and these are full barrels. But now we've totally simplified and innovated the way that we do this. That has become an industry standard. So the last thing I really want to just mention is something Dr. Bunn mentioned earlier. We have established a new partnership. It's only about a year old with the University of Kentucky and even with Eastern Kentucky University, where we're just trying to build bridges and establish new opportunities for future leaders to get some industry experience before they ever walk in the door. So it's a really cool thing. I've added about 10, 12 slides here for you to look through at your leisure. But it's something we are very proud of at Beam Suntory, and something that we really look forward to with partnering with our friends at Kentucky and hopefully developing our future industry leaders. So thankful for the time. I'm grateful for everybody putting up with me and listening to me, and just really value the partnership we have with SouthON and SIR.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for an inspiring presentation. Oh my gosh, on your career influences, as well as your introduction to the distilling industry, safety in general, and a lot of the approaches that you have instituted, not only for the industry in Kentucky, but for global safety and for the industry standards that are being developed, as well as your unique approaches, innovative approaches to environmental health and safety training and lived experience. So thank you very much for that inspiring presentation.
My pleasure.
I'll now turn it over, the Q&A, to Dr. Andy Kane, who will moderate this Q&A session. Thanks again.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Steve. You've covered quite a bit. I must be from North America because I really appreciated your personal touch and your and sharing about your career path that ultimately led you to opportunity, right? And then ultimately to Beam Suntory. And even though you didn't really appreciate environmental health and safety really as a career path opportunity, when opportunity knocked, it was clear from what I've just heard that you're an individual with passion and enough creativity that you developed a vision, right? Those two elements seemed to be critical in your successes that brought you to the leadership position that you're in now, and apparently still loving it. So you've talked about several things: the importance of team synergy and including stakeholders as part of the team, getting to know the workers, getting to know their environment, and getting to know the countless potential lurking risk factors, right, that they're exposed to on a daily basis. So you've covered a lot. I'm certainly stimulated thinking about how that applies in my world, which is very different than yours. We have a lot of questions from our audience. Let me bring a couple of those up here. How do the economics drive the environmental health and safety portfolio in the company, in the global company? So you have mentioned several cases where you have made really great strides to put worker health and safety first, and there's a cost to that. Did that actually have an economic benefit, and what were the drivers that allowed the company to institute such changes at such an expense?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question for anyone in this industry, because we work in an area, environment, health, and safety, where the payoff is often not noticeable. You don't have, very rarely do you have an A plus B equals C. It's almost always a cost, or I would call it an investment, that will likely not pay for itself. So you have to look into other areas. So for me, the economics of it are, how do we build a business case that tells the whole story? And what do I mean by that? So, for example, 55% of our injuries were in the warehouse before we did all this warehouse remediation. Now, that's a lot of money in injuries and expenses. The one serious injury I told you about was over $1 million that we paid out. So now we have about 8% of our injuries occurring in a warehouse alone. So we have significantly driven that down. Now, is that a quote savings? Not necessarily. But the investment that we put in to protect our people, number one, it protects our buildings. We've got better fire safety hazards inside of our buildings. We've got less risk to our employees. So that's a cultural improvement. They know that. They're more aware. It builds engagement. And three, our cost of treating injuries is down over $1.4 million a year since we started this project. So is there a direct A plus B equals C? No. But I can tell you the investment piece is there where everyone on board can see that we've improved our capital expense. We've improved the things that we own. They now have a longer shelf life than they did even 2 or 3 years ago. So that's better. And the impact that we have for our people is significantly improved. So can you put a cost on culture? Can you put a cost on getting people to shift the way that they think, where they used to think we fought against them? I could tell you horror stories about the things we dealt with some of our people who didn't frankly believe me that I wanted to make changes. They flat out told me, we can't do this. It's always been this way. We've told people this before. And we said, just give us a chance. Let us do this. So shifting that culture doesn't have a cost to it, but we went from having disengaged employees to completely ownership engaged employees, which is infinitely more valuable than the money we spent on fixing those things.
Great, thank you. That's really good to know to help translate that into other industry sectors. So here's
you have to build the business case every time. No one's going to give you money if you can't build the business case. And in my case, that took even inviting people to come look at the challenges that we face firsthand. Come see for yourself that I know what I'm talking about. Simple things like that. If you can build the business case, the money will almost always be there if you're with a good company.
Build the business case. Here's a compound question from one of our attendees. How did you achieve such a decrease in injuries in your time frame? And was it through a change in your hiring process? Was there any conditioning that employees engage in prior to work? Do you use robotics to decrease strain on individuals? Do you have any occupational physicians that are in-house? And those decreases that you talked about, were those mostly in developing countries, or was that just across the board?
In fact, almost all of our decrease was related to our improvements in Kentucky, which is where our biggest challenges were. I can tell you 100% of the international region has basically stayed the same over our time. Slight decrease, but they were really good. They were really good. And in fact, a lot of our European regulations are stronger than they are here. So they had really good practices in place. And let's not forget, they're hundreds and hundreds of years older than we are here. So they had good practices in place that we didn't have here. So part of it was about sharing that information back and forth. These sites didn't communicate with each other. So it was about embracing that, bringing the group together. Now, every one of my EHS people on our team, they know each other. They call each other. They can rely on each other. That's one thing we did. Is that best practice sharing, understanding that we're a team and that we're trying to build bridges together. But I think the thing that we did the most, they mentioned robotics. Of course, we have some, not nearly enough. That's part of our strategy. If you look on that vision that we created, that will be part of our strategy going forward. But not enough of that automation type stuff. But what we did the best, I think, is we shifted the way people think. We changed. I'm an extremely vulnerable person in terms of how I lead. I tell you the things I'm bad at. I tell you the things that my failures in life. I'm not afraid to use my frailties in order to help someone understand how they can get buy-in on their own. So I use the term heartstrings. We pull on heartstrings all the time, just to get that cultural shift. I would be surprised if you could find an employee that doesn't think I care about them, genuinely. And so that started with changing how people think and view our EHS team. We're in this together. We understand and recognize we're not, quote, saving the company money or bringing in money. We are here for you. That's why we're here. I serve you, the employee. That's my number one job. So first thing was to get them to believe that. The second thing was to show them that we mean it, which is some of these ways that we engage people. That has been the number one driver, ownership of the employees. knowing that they own their work, that they are empowered to stop work at any time, knowing that they are empowered to come to us with innovative ideas, knowing that, COVID is another example of this. I care about COVID for them. I want them to be safe, not because of any other reason. So I think that's been our number one driver of how we've reduced our rates so much, and how I think our future is so much brighter than it's ever been, and we'll continue to see those results.
Fantastic. You handled that both with clarity, and that was a compound question. You nailed every one of those. I really appreciate that. That was really helpful. A couple of other questions quickly in the minutes remaining. Did the 12-mile apart sites, I think that was in Kentucky, ever synchronize their processes?
Yes, we did that rather quickly and with urgency, for sure.
All right, so here's one question from one of our student attendees. As a Kentuckian, golfer, bourbon fan, and education research center student, found your talk wonderful. Thank you. My question to you would be, as someone on the other side of a career transition, what would your advice be to someone in the middle of that right now?
It's hard without knowing individual circumstances, but I am driven by passion. I think sometimes we don't know we have passion, as was the case with me. You're sort of forced into a role. So from my perspective, it's go into it with an open mind, and then recognize where your strengths are and how you can leverage those strengths into improved performance. So my number one piece of advice for anyone in any career is to, everyone has an idea of what that role is. And sometimes people think, oh, you're the safety guy. You're the OSHA guy. I get that all the time. What do you do? You're the OSHA guy. Okay, great. I hate that. I'm not the OSHA guy. I'm not a technical guy. I have technical people on our team, but I am a people guy. I love people. That's what motivates me, right? So everybody has this preconceived notion as to who you are and what this role should be and how you're going to be successful. And if you meet that standard, you will always keep your job. Always. People will be relatively pleased with your performance. But from my perspective, do something different. Surprise people. Find a way to do something differently than everybody else does it. If you do that, even if you fall on your face, people will notice, and they will be inspired by your creativity. They will think, I like to think in my role, I've changed the way at Beam Suntory, at Kellogg's, at Rock-Tenn, I've changed their impression of who an EHS manager, leader, professional is. I don't think they look at me and go, that's the OSHA guy. So to just be courageous enough to be a little bit different.
And in reality, you probably got them to change a little bit about the way they see themselves, but that's not always a conscious scenario, right? Because if they can see you differently, that's because they're seeing what you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got one other question here from one of our attendees. Excellent presentation. You made it sound pretty easy to invest safety innovations in the corporate structure. So really, how difficult was it to convince management? You talked about, let me show you, take them by the hand, let me show you, present it as a business model. But the question really is, how difficult was it to convince management to invest like that in the warehouses?
Let me answer that in two ways. It was not difficult to get them to invest once they knew the challenge. Convincing them of the challenge was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life professionally. I can't think of another. As I mentioned in my talk, there are hundreds of years of history, and I was the first person to say, guys, we got it, right? These are buildings that are 70, 80 years old, 100 years old. And to hear it for the first time from a new guy who's just coming in with no industry experience, who doesn't drink, who's not a friend of the brand, if you know what I mean, that's a right reason to have doubt. And I was questioned over and over and over again. And I didn't have any credibility, rightfully so. You earn credibility. And without having the wisdom to say, frankly, the only reason I invited him out, I was fearful of my job. I thought, how do I convince them that this is important? And the only thing I could think of in a moment of waking up in the middle of the night was, I got to bring them out to see this themselves. And as I'm certain they were totally unaware. And you're not going to see people in those roles, like your CEO. They're not going to go walking around random warehouses. They don't have time for that. but you have to make it critical to them. You have to tell the story, build the business case. And after we invited them out, after we told them how important it was, to their credit, every one of them came out and spent over a day. Now, that is a big ask of people on an executive leadership team position. It doesn't happen. But you as a leader have to have the ability to ask them to do things. They want to support you. They want that desperately. They don't want you to tell them what they want to hear. They want you to have the courage to say, here's what I need in my role to be successful, and here's why. And then you have to find the way to tell that story. So it was extremely hard, the most stressful part of my career ever, but it was worth it. And once we told the business case, the money has never stopped. And to Beam's credit, it will always be there. I'm certain of that. That isn't always the case at every place I've ever worked, but I've been lucky to work at a few organizations where they don't question the spend for protecting people if you can build the business case. Dr. Kane, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Steve Tucker, for a really great, valuable, insightful opportunity to learn about, how you get to where you are and how you can really become ultimately a vital leader in occupational health and safety, in your world, in your sphere. Each of us have our own spheres, multiple spheres, in fact, every day. And the type of leadership that you're talking about really just comes from the vision and the passion that you talked about. And I think the third most common word that I heard from you, or at least that stuck with me, was communications, the importance of communications, understanding cultural and communication differences between sites, between people, between cultures. And those are the very same issues that were brought up yesterday in our panel discussion about how do we connect with our stakeholders. And so you've really illustrated that in a beautiful way in industry and through Beam Suntory. We thank you so very much for your contribution and sharing with us and being part of our community today. Thank you so very much.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I want to invite, one of the things I hate about this virtual atmosphere is I don't get the connection with the people. You don't get that immediate feedback. So I would invite anybody that ever has any questions or concerns, challenges that you want to talk through, reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I think my email can be easily found. So I invite that of anybody that I can help support. I'd be happy to do my best.
Fantastic. Again, thank you. We're going to take a short break for 15 minutes and come back with pilot project presenters. So stay tuned, get something to eat, drink, stand up, find the restrooms, which, by the way, are down the hall and to the left. And we'll see you shortly.